It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. So glad you're joining us today. For the next half hour or so, we'll be talking about some good things going on at the University of Louisville, research, students, programming, all sorts of stuff. So we hope you'll stick around for the next half hour or so for U of L Today with Mark Hebert. So coming up in the second half of the show, the fourth woman to be nominated and sworn into a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. She's a justice, and she's coming to the University of Louisville. See if you can figure out who that is by the time the interim dean of the law school, Susan Duncan, comes on the show to tell us about that event, the new class of law school students, and the community service work they're doing here in Louisville. But first, they are professors and researchers in the U of L College of Education and Human Development who are doing groundbreaking research on teacher interactions with difficult students. And they say they have the largest database in the world on teacher-student interactions. So if you're a big fan of tough discipline, you might find some of Terry Scott's research conclusions hard to believe. He's here now to talk about his classroom research with Regina Hearn, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Special Education, and Terry is also a professor in the College of Education and Human Development. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Terry, you've been on the program before. Why don't you kind of give a summary for those of us who are folks who are listening who don't know what your research is about. What are you doing in terms of research on interactions between students and teachers, and particularly those students who are tough to deal with perhaps in the classroom?
Well, we looked at the research, everything that was available in the entire world. What are the things that give you the best chance of having kids be successful? And what we found is those things that make kids successful work as well for kids with challenging behaviors. So it's not a separate set of things. It's even more important that we use effective instruction. So we then went out and started looking at classrooms. We've now been in over 7,000 of those classrooms. Excuse me. And what we're asking is, are teachers using those instructional behaviors that we know are most effective? And when they do or don't, how does that affect what kids do? So in a nutshell, we've got a huge database that we can analyze to say, what does the average teacher do? What does the average kid do? And how does what the average teacher does affect what the average kid does?
And how does it?
Well, what we find is, first and foremost, teachers use very, very small amounts of these things. And we're talking about things like teachers talking to kids, asking kids questions, getting kids engaged, teachers giving simple feedback to kids, yes, no, that's right, that's wrong. We find that those things happen at incredibly low rates. And we also find that the lower those rates are, the more off-task and disruptive the kids are.
Wow, and that's a little bit of an indictment of either teacher education or teachers in general, or the system that they have 30 kids in their class and they don't have the time to take with individual
I think all
kids.
of the above.
All right. Well, Regina, you teach special education, correct? Or you teach teachers who want to be special ed teachers, correct?
Yes.
So how do you fit into this study that Terry's been working on?
Well, one piece that I would add is we take those effective teacher practices and we embed those in our coursework. And we encourage our teachers to implement those in the classrooms as they're doing their practicums, as they're doing their student teaching, to really embed those practices as a skill set so that we are more likely to see those in the classroom setting.
So the new teachers that are coming out of U of L should have some tools to deal with kids who can be disruptive.
Absolutely.
And in special education, do we find that the kids that are what we call special education kids, are they more disruptive and more likely to disrupt a classroom than the average kid?
We do find that.
Special ed, no. Kids in special ed for behavior problems.
For behavior problems,
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, that's a different
That is, yes.
category then.
Absolutely.
Are kids being placed in those classes in the special ed category if they're disruptive, even though they're not considered, quote, special ed, what we would consider special ed?
The large majority of kids who are in special ed are not in a special class. They're fully included with all the other kids. Even kids with the most challenging behaviors, by and large, are in the typical classroom. So what we've looked at, and this has really been a big part of Regina's work, is do teachers treat those kids differently? Do teachers engage those kids more often, which is what we'd want to see, and provide more feedback? But, and Regina can talk about it, no, they don't.
Okay.
And what we actually found is we looked at the interactions between teachers and adolescents that had behavior problems in the classroom, just exhibiting behavior difficulties in the classroom. We actually found that teachers interact with them less than they do with other students in the classroom. And we're not exactly sure why that is. We have some ideas that, maybe it's best not to ask them a question. You're not sure what's, going to prompt that next response from them. But we find that if they do give them feedback, they give them negative feedback, and they are very unlikely to ask them questions about the curriculum or engage them in the specific activities.
We're talking with Regina Hearn and Terry Scott from the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Louisville, and we're talking about their study and their database of all these interactions between teachers and kids in classroom. Terry, there was something that you passed along to me that I thought was really interesting, and you mentioned it earlier. You said, across grades, we find that teachers use extremely low rates of the instructional behaviors that we know provide the highest probability for student success. So teachers just aren't using the tools that they should know or were given to them. Is that a problem in every school, or are there some schools that are doing a great job of getting teachers that are interacting with kids one-on-one and doing a better job of engaging them and keeping them out of these disruptive behaviors?
Certainly, when I'm saying we do a poor job of it, I'm talking about on the average, and there is variation. However, even that variation is from 0 to fairly low, but small differences in observation accrue over time. So, for instance, we looked at all of our what we call Title I or high poverty schools. And we went in and we assessed every teacher in these schools. And we looked at the difference between high poverty schools that are really high achieving and high poverty schools that are very low achieving. The only difference in those two kinds of schools, high achieving and low achieving, all high poverty, is the degree to which the teachers engage the kids during instruction. So the average kid in a high poverty school that's high achieving gets more than 260 additional chances to respond to instruction every week. And there's the difference. So you might say per minute, the difference is very little. But when you take that per minute and accrue it over the week, the month, the year, those kids get a lot more instruction.
So kids who come from low-income backgrounds in poor school districts can succeed if their teachers are engaging them one-on-one more in the classroom. Is that essentially what you're trying to tell me, or
That's what we're really trying to understand better. What are those key teacher behaviors that we can encourage in the classroom setting that are going to give students the best opportunity to be successful? And one of those that we found in this difference between the two groups is that the teachers in the high-performing schools where students were being successful really are giving them lots of opportunities to interact.
And when you say opportunities to interact, Regina, what is that on a practical level for me? I don't understand what that means. What is that?
Absolutely. What we're specifically looking at are prompts from the teacher to engage directly with the curriculum. For example, when you're asking students to complete a problem and give the answer, you're asking students to raise their hand and tell you something. You want them to explain something, model something. Everyone do this problem and show me something that says that you're interacting with this. The opposite of that would be more of like a lecture type presentation.
Standing in front of the blackboard or the old-fashioned blackboard.
Or just talking.
Or just telling the kids, you go work on this and figure it out.
Yes.
Which we see a lot of, and all of our data says when teachers say, why don't you guys just figure it out, we get the highest rates of off-task and the highest rates of disruption.
So they need a little help.
They need a
little
little direction.
Prompting is the word you use,
yes,
right?
the
Teaching.
prompting.
We're here with Regina Hearn and Terry Scott from the College of Education and Human Development at UofL. Terry, another thing that you sent me that I thought was interesting, you said minority students receive more negative statements from all teachers regardless of their behaviors. What does that mean?
Well, there's a lot of people writing about this, and so we wanted to pull it apart and see what was there in our data set. And what we found is, because we code when we do an observation, the ethnicity and the gender of the teachers and the students we're looking at, what we found is that knowing that a teacher is of a certain ethnicity or a certain gender is not a predictor for anything. There's pretty equal levels of teaching across everybody we see. When you look at students, however, what we find is that if we've coded a student as being a minority, they are far more likely to get negative interaction with the teacher. The teacher's far more likely to say something negative to them. And if you control for their behavior, we find that it still holds true. And it doesn't matter if the teacher was a male or a female, or if the teacher was a minority or a non-minority. Our minority kids get more negative interaction regardless of their behavior. And it's something that we really struggle to explain. There are a lot of ways we could talk about it, and some of it, quite frankly, is difficult to talk about.
Well, let's be frank. We've had some folks on the show who've talked about teachers and counselors trying to interact with kids using hip-hop culture, something that black kids can relate to and understand. Is that the deal, that you've got white teachers, mainly white teachers, that just don't understand African-American youth and culture? Is that a fair assessment or not?
I don't think that we have data that would support that. That could be the case.
Okay.
I think it's more likely that everybody is affected by the culture. And so if as human beings we see patterns and start to believe that those patterns are something that's going to happen again, whether you are black or white, you're just as likely to fall prey to those patterns. And so that might explain why we actually do see that minority kids have more problem behaviors. But even if we control for that, we see the same issues. But the reason why we likely see the difference in those behaviors is because our African American kids especially are overrepresented in poverty and are overrepresented in schools where teachers are less qualified. If you look across the board in the United States of America, if you're a kid from a disadvantaged background, you probably have teachers that are far less experienced than kids that are in more affluent areas. So all of this starts to play together, and which is most important, it's really hard to say.
Right, gotcha. All right. Laura, or I just wanted to call you Laura Hearn. I guess you hear that from time, like Laura Dern. Regina, what would you say to folks who say, if you've got a disruptive kid in the classroom, you should just send them down to the principal's office and deal with them that way. It's we've got to be more disciplined, and the teacher should just get them out of the classroom because they're disrupting other kids. Some kids you just can't deal with. You got to get them out of the classroom. What would you say to that person?
I would ask them to think about the student's behavior in terms of what do we need to teach them. Before we send them out of that room, let's really think about what is that skill deficit and how can we teach the behavior that we would like to see instead of removing them from the environment in which they're going to be hopefully successful academically. We really want teachers to keep their students in the classroom. And in our pre-service programs, we really encourage our teachers to use positive classroom supports, good classroom arrangements, good structure in their classroom to address as many potential problems as they can to try and prevent some of that disruptive behavior that might lead them out of the classroom.
Are there some kids that you just can't deal with, that they just need to go into an alternative school or spend half the day in the principal's office?
Yes, but it's a very small percentage. And what we find is if you show us a kid who has high levels of disruption, more likely than not, the teacher in that classroom is using extremely low rates of the things that we would like to see them use in order to prevent that. So we have zero evidence in the world that sending a kid out of the classroom will change their behavior. Sometimes kids' behavior is so dangerous or disruptive that they have to be removed. But prior to them being removed, as Regina was saying, we'd like to see that the teachers have used all the things that give us the best chance of them being successful. Teachers that use the lowest rates of engagement have kids that are, what's the, I'm trying to, 67% more likely to be disruptive. So if we know that teachers' behaviors create a probability for disruption, we also know that teacher behaviors can create a probability for not having disruption.
All right, so what are we teaching the kids at UofL? Regina, you already talked about it a little bit, but what are we teaching these new teachers that are going out into the world and teaching in JCPS? What are we telling them on the ground how to deal with those students?
The students, specifically in addressing challenging behaviors, we are really working with our pre-service teachers to help them understand the best ways to structure their environment, to teach the behaviors that they are looking for very explicitly in the classroom setting and to definitely make connections and have positive interactions with their students. If we can really address those three things, we're really setting up a positive climate in that classroom environment.
And the education graduates and teaching graduates from the University of Louisville are learning this stuff and should be great teachers when they get out in the classroom and should be able to deal with this,
If
right?
you're in special ed at UofL, you're hearing this every day from us.
Yes, you are.
Okay, very good. All right, terrific. Terry Scott, thanks for coming back. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for
Regina
inviting me.
Hearn, it's nice to meet you, and you're welcome back anytime to talk about this study as they move along, because it's really interesting stuff and, as you might suspect, a little controversial. Susan Duncan is the interim dean of the Brandeis School of Law at the University of Louisville, and she's got a big event coming up at the University of Louisville Law School. So why don't you tell us about it, Susan?
Well, I'd love to. We, on September 15th, will host Justice Kagan. She will receive the Brandeis Medal this year, so we're very excited to have another Supreme Court justice join us. The Brandeis Medal has a long history, and we give it to somebody who reflects Brandeis's values. And so this year, the committee chose Justice Kagan.
Why Elena Kagan? I mean, for folks who don't know her, I mean, you know, we hear about the Supreme Court justices all the time, but for people who don't really know who she is, where she came from, why'd you pick her? What's her background?
Brandeis's values, are about individual liberty, concern for disadvantaged, public service, and that mirrors real well with her values. So she has been a champion for human rights, for equal opportunity, for individual freedom. So she fits nicely with that. She's a renowned scholar, first woman dean at Harvard, first woman solicitor general. So she really is a legal powerhouse, and it's exciting to get to bring somebody with this kind of stature to our university.
I think a little bit of her history, wasn't she rejected by, or the Senate didn't vote on her initially for a Court of Appeals? Then she went and became the dean of Harvard and came back and winds up on the Supreme Court.
Right,
so,
right.
Things work out for a reason, I guess, right?
We're really excited. One of our professors, Justin Walker, he's a newer professor. He was Justice Kennedy's law clerk, but he will actually interview her that night, and she was his dean and actually taught him administrative law while at Harvard. So it'll be kind of fun now for the student to actually interview the professor.
So has he got a lot of tough questions about the Supreme Court cases and stuff coming up? Can we look forward to that?
Well, we can't look forward to
Hardball
that.
interview?
You're right. We can't do that because they are not allowed to talk about the ongoing cases. But it will be really interesting for her to talk about the inner workings of the Supreme Court, some of the things that are lore to the Supreme Court, and he will get to those points, but not any cases, unfortunately.
You know what I've always wanted to know, and there's been some books written about it, is what really goes on in the back room at the Supreme Court. Do those the four conservative judges just hate the four liberal judges, or are they cordial? Do they go out for beers after work? What happens?
Actually, I think they're very cordial, and I think they would be a good study for us to learn how to be civil, even if we disagree. Because you're right. I mean, there's strong philosophical disagreements on the court, but some of the people you would least expect. I think Ginsburg was best friends with Scalia, and I really do think that they have a deep respect for each other. They understand that they can disagree and still be friends, and I think they are a very close-knit group there.
While Justice Elena Kagan is in town, what is she going to be doing that the public might be able to get involved with?
So definitely they should come to the dinner. That's at the Seelbach that night on September 15th. It's $100 for a ticket, and they can go on our website and register for that. And it's selling out pretty quickly, so I would not wait. I would go ahead and get that done. Then she'll do things with just our students and our faculty that day. She'll actually put a wreath on Justice Brandeis's grave, which is traditional for Supreme Court justices that visit us. I think hopefully we'll have little Brandeis elementary students there when she does that, and they have loved being able to meet our recipients in the past.
And for people who don't know, where is Justice Brandeis's grave?
His grave and his wife's grave is right under the portico of the law school. So I pass them every day. There's a tradition for good luck to put money or animal crackers on that grave for exams. So the students do that. He loved animal crackers, and they put some pennies and other, I guess it depends how much they've studied, higher valued coins on the grave for good luck. But we are one of the only schools that I know of that have a Supreme Court justice buried in front of their school. So
yeah, I don't think there's too many others.
Yes.
And students literally walk over his grave as they walk into the law school.
He's to the right.
Well,
we don't
that's
really
true.
walk
Yeah,
over
true.
his
Not
grave.
right over,
but
right past
right past his grave.
Right past it, which is kind of cool. We're talking to
Yes.
Susan Duncan, who's the interim dean of the Brandeis School of Law at the University of Louisville. Also, I want to talk to you a little bit about community service of your students. We went out and covered the incoming law school students.
Yes.
Had a day of service all across the city of Louisville, working on various projects. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, service is a huge point of pride for our law school. We are leaders in that across the nation. So we are one of the first schools to have a public service requirement. So years ago, we decided that our students were going to do at least 30 hours of public service. Those students do well in excess of that. I mean, on average, I'd say it's about 53 hours. One student last year did 700 hours while he was in law school. That graduating class last year gave 10,000 hours of public service. And this is pro bono service, I mean, legal service. So it has a huge impact on the community. And we're very proud that that's a value of ours. It was a value of Justice Brandeis. He was known as the people's attorney. So this is our way of the students following that legacy.
And a number of the students that we talked with when we were out with these first-year students were from outside Louisville. So they
Yes.
weren't really familiar with Louisville. They didn't know who their classmates were. So does that also fit into this, that in their first week when they come on the UofL campus, it's a great way to get to know a little bit about Louisville, a little bit about their classmates?
It is. It's great for them to start to bond right away. There's upper-level students with them, faculty and staff are sometimes with them at these sites, and so they get to see the city, they get to meet their classmates, and I think at least 75 out of that 111 actually participated in a voluntary activity, so that's a good sign what this class is going to be like.
Does it help, too, that I don't know how to put this gently, so I'm just going to say it, that a lot of the kids who go to law school perhaps come from middle income or higher income families, and by doing community service and going out in the community and seeing how the other half lives, for lack of a better term, that gives them more compassion. Does it make them better lawyers?
I think anytime you serve others, it's going to make you be a better lawyer, and that's what our profession is about, serving others. I do think, though, that we have a lot of first-generation students and a lot of students who are not from upper middle class that you would expect. So I don't think, if you look up the makeup of our class, that we would be all elite kind of students. So it's a very diverse class. And I think that no matter where you come from, always giving back is an important value of our profession.
And there are about 100 students in the incoming class?
111.
111 brand new law school
Yes.
students. Okay. And they're about split, male and female.
They are. It's really 50-50 this year.
Isn't that unusual? Haven't there been a lot more women that have been going to law school than men in the past, or not?
No, normally it's been about 50-50. A couple of years ago, we saw a little dip in the women, and we were worried what that meant. But it looks like it's right back where it was.
And the average GPA of those students in high school, or actually coming out
College.
of college, is 3.3. So what's
Right.
that tell you?
They're very bright students, so they do very well. They have very interesting backgrounds. A lot of them have different degrees than you might expect, so it runs the spectrum what their degrees are from. I think we have 38 universities maybe represented in this class. Lots of public service, leadership qualities in the class. So we don't look just at grades and LSAT score. We want a really stellar student and leader that will go out into the community and make us proud.
When you are digging through the applications for U of L's law school, do you look to have X number of students from out of state, X number of women, X number of men? Do you do that or not?
No, I don't think we have any number in mind. We just try to get the best class we can get, but we always are looking at diversity broadly. So we want diversity of thought, diversity from region, diversity from gender, nationality. So I don't know exact number target we're trying to reach, but we're just trying to compile a class that will be very diverse in every area.
Right, but you want the best students available, obviously.
Absolutely,
Okay.
right.
Let's talk a little bit, too, about something we've chatted about before, the 3+3 program.
Yes.
What is that?
So that's an opportunity for undergrads to come to us in their fourth year of college. So instead of finishing out their degree programs in their majors, the majors are allowing them to count the 1L year as that last year in college. So it allows a student to jumpstart their career because they'll get done with undergrad and law school within 6 years instead of 4+3, which would be 7. So it's going to be great for bright students that work with their advisors to make sure the requirements are met, and then they'll come to law school. They can, if they go to U of L, they can keep that undergraduate scholarship in addition to anything we give them. So financially, it will help with their debt load, and they'll just be able to get into the practice of law sooner.
Was that the idea, just to cut the number of years that they actually have to pay law school tuition? Is that the idea, just to save kids money?
That was definitely one benefit of it, that we knew that they had a lot of debt from college, a lot of debt in law school, so we were trying to help ease that for people that really want to be attorneys. And I think some of these students are just ready. That senior year, they know what they want to do. They're just ready to go on to that next stage. So we thought that the really bright students would be up for the challenge.
And this program, this 3+3 accelerated program, is targeting which majors? I mean, if I'm
Right.
at U of L right now, what major do I have to be in to get into the 3+3 program at the law school?
So right now, 4 majors have agreed to partner with us, and those are criminal justice, women and gender studies, history, and then the liberal studies major. So those 4 are on board right now, and we hope to get more as we see how successful this is going to be.
One more thing I want to chat with you about before you leave is we've been seeing U of L graduates, U of L law school graduates in the news a lot lately with the gay marriage ruling and some other things. When you go out and talk to alumni groups or, on the flip side, potential students, what do you tell them about U of L law school grads that perhaps will make them proud or come to U of L law school?
Well, our law school grads are the leaders in every field. So definitely they're leaders downtown in the law firm. So they're the managing partners. They're some of the best attorneys. They're leaders in the legislature. Right now, the head of the Senate and the head of the House are both our grads. They're leaders. Most of the judges are University of Louisville law grads. The college business dean at Bellarmine's a U of L grad, so in academics, they're leaders. In businesses, we have lots of general counsels or CEOs. So no matter what you want to do with this law degree, our grads are the leaders.
Yay, our grads.
Yay, our grads. So we're very, very proud of our grads.
All right. Susan Duncan, the interim dean of the law school at U of L. And so since you're bragging on the graduates, let me brag a little bit more on a current student. This is something we try to do at the end of every program. We try and give a little tidbit, a little trivia about the University of Louisville. So, Brandeis School of Law students brought home 2 big awards from the American Bar Association in August, Public Service Award and the ABA Involvement Award. And one of the students, John Weber, was inducted as one of 3 newly elected Law Student Division delegates to the ABA House of Delegates,
Yes,
right?
that's a big deal. I mean, that's at a national platform, and only 3 people got elected, and he was one of them. So we're very proud of John.
Very proud of John. All right.
Yes.
So that'll about wrap up the program for today. Thanks for listening to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on Monday and Tuesday nights after Ramsey and Rutherford, and Saturday and Sunday mornings on 93.9 The Ville. You can also find video of some of these shows on Louisville's Metro TV and on KETKY. And tune into Great Day Live on WHAS 11 every Monday morning around 9:30 or so to catch me with a story about something cool going on at the University of Louisville. So thank you all for listening to U of L Today with Mark Hebert. Go Cards!